All right. So, good morning. You're on the Get Busy Livin Podcast. I'm Dr. Scott from Six Sense Acupuncture and also the Healthy Habits Club. And we've got a fantastic guest on today, Adeel Rizva. Is that how you pronounce it, Adeel?
Rizvi.
Rizvi.
Yep.
My apology. And he's from Property Strategies. So, thank you so much, Adeel, for coming on and giving us some gold nuggets today. We hope to hear some. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Scotty, for having me, and welcome to everyone, all your audience. It's a pleasure to be here today.
And also your audience, because they're getting you're getting a piece of the deal under Dr. Scott as well. So,
Yep.
um, hi to all your uh, uh, viewers as well.
Yep.
So, okay, Adeel, we're gonna kick off with the first question. So, tell us, Adeel, what gets you out of bed every morning?
On the surface of it, dropping kids to school, I would say, but that's on the lighter side of it. But uh, what gets me out of bed? It's really the purpose which I found a few years ago, well into my 30s, and it's more about what we can do in our lives to be more in control of our financial future and have our financial happiness in our own hands. That was kind of a light bulb moment for me when I realized that we can control our finances to quite a lot of extent. And that does not mean working long hours. That does not mean just working your backside off and not having enough time for things you love to do. So my job is to make sure that I can help people become more happier for the future and more happier in terms of their financial conditions. So that's really my big motivation now. I lost you, sorry, with the voice.
Yes, you did, because I'm muted myself. My
You're back.
apologies, Adeel.
That's
So,
okay.
so yeah, I get it, brother. You're just basically trying to help the community and with their finances and also with their businesses and as well as their personal lives. I get it, and it's commendable, brother. It's much appreciated. So you're into property strategies. So tell us
Yep.
a little bit more. So how did you get into that? First of all,
Yeah. So, the, I mean, I it's something that was based on a personal experience. I had always had love of for property and investing in property, even when I was overseas. And once I arrived in Australia like 12 years ago, 12, 13 years now, and I found that you can buy properties in Australia just by paying like 20% deposit, and the rest of the money comes from the bank. And I was like, wow, from where I come from, uh, we buy everything out of cash. There's no concept of mortgage. And over here, you have mortgage where you can pretty much leverage. And I was introduced to the power of leverage. And I was like, mate, that's what I need to do, because it means I don't have to have $500,000 cash to buy that $500,000 property, right? I can just do it with
yeah,
$100,000. So that's how I started getting into property. But the main motive for me was I had seen my father do it overseas, and I had heard people over here as well. Like Aussies love property, we love property, right? So
yeah,
everyone's a property expert. Everyone wants to do well in property. Everyone has an opinion about property. What will happen with the negative gearing reforms and stuff, which is in the news these days. So if you talk to anyone, they all have some kind of views, right? And no one backs off their
yeah.
views. So my job really was to. I had a really bad investing experience. Even as much as I was in love with property, I did a really emotional purchase decision years ago. And I am from Sydney, and I ended up buying something in Sydney which costed me a lot of money, and not just costed money, but it also did not grow in value at all. So I had to get rid of it after 5 years. And during that purchase, it was a big eye opener for me. That made me realize that buying anything and everything just because it fits your budget doesn't really cut it in the Australian property market. You need to understand the market a bit more, and that's where the strategy side of things really comes into play. So yeah, it was all about strategizing first, having the right strategy, which means simply understanding your risks, your goals, where do you want to be, what do you want to achieve, how can you get there without affecting your bank account today. You don't want to live a broke life to be a wealthy person when you die. That's what I believe in. So yeah, that's how I started becoming more aligned with making sure that I am working on my own property strategy first. And that's how I started my property investing journey while I was still in my corporate role. So yeah, that's how the strategies thing started.
Very cool. So yeah, you're right. But I mean, it's okay to make mistakes. Adeel. Like when you make a mistake, you don't forget it, and um, it makes you a better person as well. So that's commendable that you bring that up because yeah, in business as well, I've done the same thing. I've made so many mistakes, and I get it, brother. I understand, and that's very interesting that you brought up about where you're from. Where are you from, Adeel? Where's your
I'm from
family from? I should say
I'm from Pakistan.
Pakistan.
Yep.
So yeah, like you said, you got to have the cash first to pay for it, or you just don't buy it. So I understand what you're saying. You're coming from that sort of culture. Be like you'd be like a fat kid in a candy store. You'd be like, oh yes, we could buy so much stuff because you don't need much deposit to purchase them.
Exactly. That's the thing. Yeah. So that was a big
So yeah,
change for me. Yep.
yeah. So I get it. So how did you start out? Did you start out with another real estate agency, or how did that begin?
So I, from the business side of things, I even before I started my business, I was still doing the same thing which I'm doing in my business now, even well before I started it. So I was, as I said, learning about what property strategy would work, why you need to have the right strategy first before you work and start buying the right kind of assets. And that is the journey I started in around 2016 about educating myself after that bad experience of that purchase. Just tried to educate myself, learn about property cycles, how the property market works, um, some myths that were debunked along the journey as well when I gained more and more knowledge around the property market, the property cycles. And biggest myth is always buy close to a CBD. That's where you will get all the capital growth, and that's what the data actually does not quantify every single time. That is not validated by the actual sales, the actual growth of suburbs, regardless of which city you talk about. We talk about Brisbane, you talk about Sydney, Melbourne. That does not hold true in every single case. So a lot of myths were debunked, and while that education was ongoing, the pure purpose of that education was to make sure that I can acquire a property portfolio that helps me live a more comfortable lifestyle when I'm in my 50s, right? So that was the only purpose. I had no idea of what a property strategist is. I had no idea what a buyer's agent is. I wasn't even across this term, right? But essentially, I was doing all of this on my own, for myself and for my kids. So while I was acquiring properties which were really doing well for myself, and I got that confidence when I purchased a couple of them in different cities outside of Sydney, while being interstate, that gave me some confidence. And when I shared that story with my friends, with my colleagues, because I was still doing a corporate role, and I told them that I bought something, when the property thing comes up, we all brag about it, right? So I was kind of bragging a little bit. So, and they were like, "Oh, how did you do that? How do you know how can you buy in Brisbane while you're in Sydney? And how do you evaluate the market? How do you know it's not the bad property? How would you know it doesn't flood?" And things like that. And I was like, "Wait, what my questions were 2 3 years ago when I started, these are the common questions for everyone. So they probably need
Yeah.
help." And that's when I started helping them completely voluntarily. uh, 2018, 2019, for those 2 years I was really helping a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues around me, just giving them free advice, helping them with how to make an offer, helping them identify the right property value. If they saw something on real estate, they will flick it to me on a Saturday morning and say, "Oh, we may need to make an offer. Do you think it's a good buy or not?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think it's a good buy because of this, or I think you should be asking further questions with the agent, and these are the questions for your due diligence." So yeah, I was doing all of that, and then I realized I came across the concept of a buyer's agent. And when I dug deeper into it, I was like, "Oh man, buyer's agent is something that I'm already doing with my friends and with my colleagues." So that's when I started taking it a bit more seriously, and I founded my business in 2020, which is a COVID baby essentially. People have COVID
So,
babies. I have a COVID business.
so um, so I was talking about this yesterday to a friend of mine. He's in real estate too. So he was talking about capital growth. You mentioned it earlier.
Yep.
And so tell us more about that. So about capital growth and how that's important. Not just worry about getting a return on the property, but also the value of because that's what capital growth is. Yeah, it's the value of
Yep.
the property increases. So why is that so important, Adeel?
That's a very, very good question, because I had this exact mindset which I'm going to share now, and that's the wrong mindset to have. And I
Yeah,
had this mindset when I was buying my first investment, and the mindset was, I will buy something from which the rental income will actually cover the entire mortgage and probably deliver me $100 or $200 every month, because I want a positively geared property, a positive cash flow property.
yeah,
That was
that's right.
my
Yeah,
concept. And the biggest problem with that concept is that, yes, we had 1 or 2% of interest rates in the middle where everything became kind of positive cash flow. Because if you are buying a 500K property with 500 or 600 a week in rent, and the interest rate is only 2%, yes, you will be left with money in your pocket. But as soon as the interest rates become more normal, which they
yes,
are now, the 6%, the 6.5%, which is more normal now. This is not high. I don't call it high. This is normal. If you look at the
yeah,
Australian history with interest rates, this is very, very normal. You know that much better than myself. So that is where people need to be. A lot of people don't jump into property investing because they think, oh, because I'm not getting that $200 a week or $200 a month as positive cash flow, I just don't want to go into it. Because for them, what they're trying to do is, there's a thought behind that thing. There's a thought behind that analogy, or that stance that they have. Because what they want to do is, they want to pay off the loan on that investment through that rental income.
yeah,
Now, the biggest problem with that strategy is that essentially what you're doing is, you're getting rental income and you're just paying off a mortgage, a loan. If it does not grow in value, essentially what you are doing is, you are taking a loan, you're paying off the principal, plus you are paying the interest on top of that as well through the rental income. So you're not going
yeah,
forward, you're essentially going backward, because you are still paying interest from your own pocket or from the own rental income. The way I see property investing and the way people make property portfolios, the way I have been able to create my property portfolio across the country, if I continue doing that, I will probably be having to pay off my loan for at least 5 to 7 years on that property, and then be able to have enough equity to buy another asset, because I'm not focusing on capital growth. Now, with capital growth, the thing is, once your property grows in value, you buy an asset, let's say for 500K. Once it grows to, let's say, 700K in the next 3 to 4 years, that extra 200K of growth that has happened, that is why you are in property investing. Because now that extra 200K is something you can go to the bank, ask them to refinance, which means just cash that money out as a cash in your bank account, and now you are deposit ready for your next purchase. So essentially, when you're building a property portfolio, you don't have to put down a deposit every single time from your pocket. The biggest problem with the first approach is, where people are only looking to make good rental income and do not consider capital growth, is they will have to come up with the deposit every single time to buy that next asset. And which essentially means they will always be falling behind, because guess what? You need at least 100K to get started for a 500, 600K property, right? Even if you go with
yeah,
less than 20% deposit. So how many people will have the liberty to keep saving that 100 grand every 3, 4, 5 years from their
yeah.
own pocket or from their salaries? It's just not possible. So that's why capital growth is absolutely essential, because that is the stepping stone which will help you buy your next property, and then the next one, and then the next one as well.
Yeah, so yeah, that's right. So it's using the equity, basically the capital, like you were saying, the equity of those assets that you've got, because that's what banks like. Banks love equity, which is
Yep.
something I didn't really understand until recently, last few years. That yeah, banks don't really, they're not too concerned about money as such, about savings. They're more concerned about equity. So what assets you have. What I mean by that, by solid assets. So land is a perfect example.
Yep.
Um, machinery, so vehicles and the likes. So
True.
yeah, that yeah, so that so yeah, that's pretty cool. Thank you so much for that explanation. So it makes sense because I got same deal. I was at the same thinking as you. As you you get your deposit and then you put it on that property and then you got to wait until you get enough deposit again and then and like you said, if interest rates rise, well then you you're bugging. You got to
I mean, that's the because of this simple mentality. 81% of Aussies only buy one investment through their entire lifetime, one investment property.
yeah
81% only end up buying one investment because they don't know what they are buying. They don't know about the future cash flow, and they're just thinking that they will try to get and pay off the loan for that investment through their rental income and through their own pocket, which is
yeah.
like bizarre, to be honest with you. If you're paying for that through your own pocket, any interest that you're paying on that is taking you backward because you're paying extra money.
Well, but that's what we're taught, Adeel. That's what we're taught. We are
Yeah,
taught to negative gear. Most of the professionals that we ask advice of, they say it's better to negative gear.
yeah,
So
yeah. We show a loss of $100 to get $40 back.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Lose 100 to get 40 back. Why? That's what I call negative gearing.
yeah. I totally agree. You're making a loss. Basically, you're trying to write off a loss, but the problem is you're losing money in the process. So it's really an asset that's costing you money.
Very true, very true. And that's the problem with the banks as well. If you are in a too much in a negatively geared position and you go to the bank, let's say you already have a home, you have one investment property, and that's where a lot of Aussies are getting stuck right now. People will go to the bank, say, I want more loan. I have an income of $200,000, $300,000 as a family, which is very, very decent income. And even then the banks would be like, sorry, you can't service that next loan because you're already negatively geared. So you have to get stuck with either your own family home where you live, or if you have been able to buy another investment property in the last few years, then you're just stuck over there. You cannot buy more until you pay off the loan, which will take another, like reduce the loan amount over the next 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. God knows how much time will take. And by
Yeah.
that time, the market would have moved. And if you are in a position to buy something, other people who are working with the right strategy have already bought 2 or 3 assets in that time. So that's how you're falling behind if you're too much negatively geared, in my opinion.
I've done that same mistake myself. I negative geared a property and then the equity and the didn't rise enough, and I didn't lose a great deal, but I suppose if I calculated it properly, I was coming out close to
Yeah.
even, but
Yep.
still, I spent all that money. So really, in the end of the day, I lost it in the end. So I understand what you're saying. It's because of that mentality. Because we're told to, the accountants tell you that, the lawyers tell you that. They say, "Oh, negative gear, negative gear. It's good for your tax time."
It is, in a way, it is. But again, if you're showing a loss to make partially
Yeah,
back, it's still a loss. You're still behind by
you're
60
still
bucks.
losing. Yeah, you're still losing. Yeah. Anyway,
You're losing
all right.
100, you're getting 40 back. You're still losing 60. That's simple maths. And you're
Yeah,
feeling good
yeah,
about it. That's the worst part.
yeah.
People feel good about it.
Because you're told to do it. You're told to do it. And
Exactly.
you think you're doing the right thing.
I mean, if you're a doctor, you're making $1 million a year, the negative gearing will not really impact you much because, yes, you will save on tax, but you can still afford to get more lending because lenders are very generous with doctors and medical professionals. So in that case, probably negative gearing can be a part of the strategy. But again, for someone on family income of 200K, 300K, if they're negatively geared in the beginning of their portfolio, they cannot buy more than 1 or 2 properties for the next 10 years. They are stuck.
Yeah, because their wage won't rise much. That's what
Exactly. 2.5%,
yeah.
3% a year.
Yeah. So that's what banks look at, projected income, and yeah.
Exactly. Banks want to protect themselves. I mean, banks are not your friend. They're there to do the business. So, as you said,
Oh, come on, Adeel. They only look after us. They're only in it for us. Like,
oh
really?
yeah, they're just like your mom and your old aunt, right?
Yeah. There's mum. Yeah, I remember mum used to say, try and yeah, if you can, try and pay for everything outright if you can, because then you're not paying interest on something. But in saying that, like you said, you can use the banks as well. I like Richard Kiyowski. He says, Rich Dad Poor Dad. He says, never pay for anything yourself. Get someone else's money.
I love that. I love the man. I met him last year. He was here in Sydney. He was there in Brisbane as well.
Was he? Yeah, that's cool.
To meet him, actually. It was awesome.
Yeah, well, it rings in my ear all the time. It's like, yeah, why use your own money? You can use someone else's. So yeah, if you have to use the banks, and then he says that if you have to use the banks, use the banks.
And it's tax-free money. You don't pay tax on that. That's what he
says.
Yeah,
correct. Yeah.
Between good debt and bad debt as well. People feel fearful of debt. And as you said, quoting your mom as well, we have been taught that debt is bad. Stay away from debt. Right?
Yeah.
We all have been told. But there's a difference between good debt versus bad debt. If you're taking a lot of debt for your luxurious car or for a big exotic holiday, it is a bad debt. I would never recommend that. But if you're taking debt for an asset, for a 500k asset, if your debt is 400k, 100k came out of your pocket, and the same asset grows to 800k in the next 5 years, that 400 debt has made you extra 300k on top because the value has gone from 500k to 800k. Now, that growth is yours. Yes, you will pay capital gains tax when you sell it, but that growth, that money is your money. And that could not have been created if you did not take the debt. So people mix bad debt with good debt, and they just say, I just don't want to take any debt at all. And that's, if you don't want to take any debt, then stay away from property investing because it won't really work for you.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And that's another thing that Robert Kiyowski.
Yep.
He says, buy God's property. So, in other words, what he's trying to say, or God's assets. That's it. God's assets. He says, buy God's assets. Don't buy anything else. So, what he means by that is, buy land. That's God's. Yeah. That's his. You buy his land.
Exactly.
Buy gold. Buy precious metals, because that's what he made.
Yep. One thing he mentioned as well in that discussion, I asked him specifically what are his thoughts about the Australian real estate market, and I think I shared on my social media as well, and he was like that he's very optimistic about the Aussie real estate market, but he was not very optimistic about the US stock market. That's what he said. Now, I'm not comparing different assets over here because I'm not licensed to do that. But that's what he said at the time, that he thinks the stock market in the US may be a bit fluctuating, which will have direct impact on the Aussie market anyway.
Yeah. So that's great to know. Well, that's something that's not being advertised over here is that their banks are closing down. It was about 5 months ago. There was 100 banks just went into liquidation.
Wow,
people were going to the ATM over there and couldn't get any money out.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so they got big problems over there. They got huge problems.
That does not sound very romantic.
No, well, yeah, you think about it, if that happened here, geez Louise.
Wow. I was actually talking to a financial advisor yesterday in Sydney, and this is very much related. And he mentioned that for a lot of clients, they are seeing that the stock market potentially is a bit risky for them. And they may advise some of their clients to actually get out of the stock market who don't have that risk tolerance. So I think that kind of ties up with what you were just telling me with what's happening in the banks in the US, because that will have an impact on their stock market. And that's where a lot of Aussies invest their money as well, in the US stock market, right?
Yeah. So a lot of the big banks, the JP Morgans and stuff like that, had to buy the little ones up, and so to pull them out of the poo, because what they're basically doing is it's like the GFC in 2009, they were borrowing more than they were supposed to, and people just couldn't pay it back.
Yep.
So the same thing's happening now.
Yeah. I think that also ties up with the interest rates. They're bringing the interest rates down as well. So
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the US, because they want to boost the economy, they want to give people the confidence back and speed
yeah.
up the economy. So interesting times. Let's keep our eyes on this because it will not be very straightforward.
Yeah, well, they went into negative territory, which has never ever happened before. The interest rates went into negative territory, which is I've never heard of that before. We came close. We got down to 1%,
A
but
point one actually. We were down to point one.
was it 0.1? There you go.
Point
Yeah,
one
and
cash rate. Yeah.
I didn't monitor it that close, but yeah, I knew that we got down to sub ones. So I've never ever heard of that in my lifetime. I've never ever heard of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, they had to drop the interest rates to get cash flow happening, to get confidence back in the market. Because yeah, they had huge issues, especially with fuel. Fuel crashed in 2020, in April 2020. That's something that the media didn't advertise either. So
That was a big crash. I remember the fuel was cheap as anything.
yeah, but we didn't. We weren't getting any benefit from that. That's
I
the bit that.
realized there was a bit. I felt it was not as cheap in Australia as it was overseas because I remember
Yeah,
in the Middle East they were actually paying the suppliers for not storing the oil because they did not have any capacity to store anymore, and that's where it was going into negative cash flow. And I remember Sydney we were getting fuel like for 90 cents a liter, and that was like sometimes even 80 cents a liter. I remember, which was like wow, it could have gone lower, but that's what we were getting in 2020 when the COVID was at its peak. So we had a bit of an advantage of that, but not much.
yeah. It didn't really change up here. Didn't really change much at all. It come down a little bit, but not that much. It was
Why don't you move down to Sydney?
yeah. It's not a bad idea.
We have cheap
Was
fuel when COVID hits. Otherwise, we are expensive.
yeah, I know. I see that it's over $2 now. Is that right?
Yeah, it's 1.8 or more than $2 as well.
Yeah, it fluctuates obviously, but go to Costco. Costco, you know.
Oh
Have
my
you got
God.
Costco down there?
They always have a huge line. We were there, and my son was like, "Why there are so many people here?"
Yeah, because it's cheaper. That's why.
That's what I told him, and I said to him, "It's cheaper, at least by 20, 30 cents." And he was like, "Well, that does not make any difference." I said, "When you start earning, you will know the difference."
Yes. Yes. That's a good lesson.
For them, it's like just 20 cents. What difference does it make? It's just like $5, $10, right? At the end of the day. But I'm
Yes.
saying it will make a difference. Trust me, just give yourself 10 more years.
Yeah. When you start paying bills, then you'll be like, oh, gotta be an accountant yourself. So tell us. So you started your strategies, and you made a couple of mistakes. So when did you start to think, oh, okay, I can really make some money out of this? But I remember you saying you're telling your friends. Is that when the light bulb moment happened? You thought, I can actually help other people.
Yeah. So I was still helping them, but that was very informal. It was not around, there was no structure around it because I was still in my corporate role. And in 2019, end of 2019, I remember that's when I made a decision that I'll probably look at it more seriously at the buyer's agent thing, which means working for the buyer, making sure that the buyer's interests are always taken care of. So yeah, that's where it started. I set up my company in late 2019, early 2020, and I dived into it in 2020 as a business owner. So it was more formal, more structured in 2020. Yep.
Ouch.
COVID.
Yeah. The lockdown. I just call them lockdowns. Definitely wasn't about a virus.
I like
was going to say. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that was you found it tough at that time. It was
really tough. It was really tough, and I think at that time, it was kind of a blessing in disguise because everyone was locked down and people were still selling and buying properties, but they couldn't go for open homes. They could only have virtual inspections, video inspections, and things like that. So even for someone, I remember helping people who were based in Sydney, helping them buy properties in Sydney because they couldn't make out of what that video actually meant that they received for a property they liked. So they were not
Yeah.
sure whether it was the right asset for them. Should they really make an offer? What should the offer value look like? They did not want to overpay because the economy was really dire at that time. No one knew what was happening. Media was saying, if you remember, that the property market will actually go down by 30%. Well, they were half true. It actually did change by 30%, but it went the other way. It went up. So
Yeah.
that was the media commentary at the time. So yeah, I think it was kind of a good time in a way because people realized that they need help, and that's when I think I had started helping some home owners, like people looking to buy their family homes, and then gradually we started helping some property investors as well. So yeah, interesting times. I cannot forget that time, to be honest.
Yeah, it actually helped my business. I actually got, because we were considered essential services. So it actually, all the physios and chiros shut down. So I was the only one. I was like Stephen Bradbury, the last man standing. And
That's good, man.
so
You
yeah,
guys also had that rule of 5 kilometers of moving within the LGA kind of thing. You guys had that rule as well.
yeah. It, we didn't. Yeah, I think it wasn't 5Ks, it was 20Ks. I know in Victoria they had ridiculous restrictions,
Oh my
but
God.
not here. It was if you're going to and from work, but you didn't need a permit or anything like that. You
Yep.
just or if you're going for a walk or something like that, if you're going to exercise, you're allowed to go outside.
Yep.
But no, we never had any of that permit stuff like that, because I know practitioners in Victoria that were getting fined and stuff like that for
Okay. Yeah, it was
leaving,
tough.
and if they didn't have their permit to say that they had to go to work, then yeah, they were finding that. But no, not up here. We didn't have it that severe.
Mm.
Although yeah, there was an incident I was involved in, but I won't go into that. I couldn't be
Okay.
bothered.
You can tell me offline.
Yeah, I'll tell you offline. But yeah, anyway, I was going to say, yeah. So for me, it was no one come around. No one came to say, "Hey, you need to shut down." There was none of that business. So yeah, it was all full steam ahead, and yeah, it just got busier and busier. So, but yeah, I heard, yeah, the real estate guys, you guys got hammered because yeah, the price of real estate went through the roof, and it's just continued. It just hasn't stopped, from
Yeah.
what I can gather. There's a property. I sold a property in 2020, and it was worth 500. Now it's worth 800,000. Easy. Just I'm getting emails about the place all the time. So realestate.com doesn't forget for some reason.
It doesn't. If you have an account over there, you created a profile with a property address, they will keep chasing you.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, so they always give me updates about that property. So
Yep.
I mean, and that's just a normal, it was a 3-bedroom with a study. It was a 500 perch area, and yeah, all those properties around there just gone crazy. It's gone crazy.
It has
Gone
gone
nuts.
crazy. Yeah. And some of those areas that you talk about in Brisbane and even in other parts of the country, some
Yeah,
of those areas were getting like good traction even before COVID. So yes, they had a
yes,
COVID momentum in 2021 where everything went up, but a lot of areas across the country are still having momentum even there's no COVID anymore. And they will
yeah,
continue to have that just because there's so much supply and demand imbalance. There's so low, so less supply of properties versus huge demand, and that demand just does not stop with interstate migration, overseas
Yeah.
migration. It does not slow down. Like we have been migrating at least 500 600k people every single year in the last 2 3 financial years,
Yeah.
and the average before COVID was 160,000 people a year.
Yeah.
So from 160 going up to 500,
Yeah.
extraordinary migration. So the demand is definitely there. All these people need a place to live or rent, but the supply has shrunk because the building cost has gone out of the roof in COVID. People cannot afford to build new homes.
Yeah.
And then on
Yep.
top of that, if the government says, oh, investors, we are taking away negative gearing reforms from you. So guess what? I feel that the investors will get out of the market, and who will build these new homes then? So it will be a big problem. Supply will still keep shrinking. Demand is already there. And the problem with that is the property prices keep rising. And I feel for the first home buyers. I mean, they don't have a way out right now. It's very difficult for them.
Yeah, and that's another issue is housing. Is there's not enough houses being built. I remember I spoke to a builder and they got on the news, and I believe everything the news tells me, that they were saying that the government wanted 1 million houses over the next 5 years to be built. So that's 200,000 a year. I was talking to a builder and he said, "There's no way we're going to meet that." He said, "We're flat out doing 50,000 a year."
Do you know the number right now? That was the projection for last year when they talked about million or 1.2 million houses for the next 5 years. Do you know how many they actually built in that last 1 year?
We got no idea.
They are short by 70,000 already.
Yeah. And that's what this builder was telling me. He's saying, we just don't have enough tradies. We just don't have enough.
Yep.
It's too hard. It's they just can't get enough people to want to do the trade. So
I mean, we are struggling with trades, to be honest. Even with a simple carpenter, simple plumber, like once we are buying in Perth or in Brizzy, even in regional Queensland, in Adelaide, anywhere we buy, there's a shortage of trades everywhere. People, for them to come and quote for a job, even for a small job, a 1-day job for repair, they are giving us timeframes of 2 weeks and 3 weeks of lead time. Not for the parts, but just for them to come in and give us a quote for something.
That's what I'm hearing as well. Yeah, it's the same. I've got friends, businesses, owners everywhere. They're flat out getting builders to come in, and because they just don't have there's a shortage of builders. They can't get them to go and fix the fence up. Can't come and fix the pipe up because there's just not enough of them.
Very true. It's not a good sign.
All right, brother. So tell us, you've done well. We're almost to the 40-minute mark. So just tell us about a testimonial that someone that you've helped to purchase a home with your services.
Would definitely love to. We have a lot of testimonials for that. But one story that comes to my mind, a very emotional one, and a couple of them actually. I'll go through them very, very quickly. One of them is for a couple here in Sydney who have been wanting to buy an investment property for the last 21 years. And they had it noted down on their Christmas tree book in 2003 that they want to buy investment property in that year. They haven't done anything for the last 21 years, and they were introduced to us 3 months ago. And they have now bought their first investment finally with us. And the good thing is that their investment in the last 6 or 8 weeks since they purchased it has already grown by 30-40 grand in value.
Wow.
So they are ecstatic. And when she was sharing that, she was like, that is the growth I've had in the last 6 to 8 weeks versus I did not do anything for the last 20 years. And I said, do I need to remind you what was the opportunity cost? And we all were silent after that because there was so much opportunity they missed by not taking action. But the good thing is they're finally taking action now. So really happy for them.
Yeah, wow. That's pretty cool. You got any other good stories?
Oh, the other one comes for a nurse, actually, a single mom of 2 kids. She spent 14 years saving a deposit of $90,000, $95,000, and couple of years when she came to us, she was really protective of those assets, and she was like, "That's all I have for my kids, but I know it's not enough. I don't even have my own home. I rent myself in a unit in Western Sydney. I want to make sure I can make the best use of this money." So we convinced her. She took the leap of faith, and we helped her buy the right investment asset. Now, 2 years fast forward, that investment property for which she put down only 90 grand from her pocket, that has grown by like close to 180, $190,000. So
Wow.
something we bought for like 400K, it's now sitting at 580, 600K. So that
Wow.
extra 200K is totally hers. And I asked her last month, I said, it took you 14 years to save that 90 grand. And now in 2 short years, you have made additional 200K on top. How long you think it would have taken you to save that 200 if you were doing it on your job? And
Yeah.
she was like, she is absolutely happy, because happy is a very understatement, because she can now
Yeah.
see that she is building real wealth, and she can use it after 5 years, 10 years. She can use it either to buy her own home where she wants to live, because she's still renting out, and that property she bought was interstate as an investment. But she has all the options after 5, 10 years, or she can just sell it and buy a bigger home, or give it to her kids for their education. So that's the kind of changes and financial happiness that I talk about. And that goes back to the question you asked in the beginning. This is something that really gets me out of my bed every day. That's the kind of freedom I want to give to the people, because there are a lot of horror stories around. People have lost a lot of money in property. There are a lot of sharks around there as well. So my job is to making sure that whatever people can afford to buy within their lifestyle, within their cash flow, not breaking their back today, and still making them good, real, solid wealth over the next 5 years, 10 years, which helps them be financially more happy. So that's really something I wanted to share with you as well.
All right, mate. I'll move into we're running out of time. I'll move into the third question. So, tell us, who's your ideal client? Who's your ideal avatar?
Simple. Anyone who wants to take action and wants to control their own financial future, and does not want to keep working until they turn 70. If they want to work, that's up to them. But if they don't need to work for that, because if
Yes,
they
yes,
do
yeah.
something
That's
strategic
the
right now, if
difference.
they're in their 30s, 40s, even 50s,
Yeah.
they can still take some good decisions now and control their financial future. So I would
Yeah,
love to work with those
choices.
people.
That's what you're saying. You want to give people choices. That's what you're
That's the
saying.
thing.
All right, brother. And yeah, it doesn't matter if you can't answer this one, but I reckon you'll have a good one. So tell us, what ideas or information would you give to create lifelong longevity?
Be happy. Don't think too much into the future. Don't regret about your past. I have made mistakes in the past. As long as you're learning from them and trying to keep healthy, uh, I'm I'm not the healthiest person on the planet, so I need to work on my own health as well. But try to be happy and try to stay in the moment, I would say, and be around with your loved ones. I just love spending time with my kids and be able to do things with them which I can while they're still young. So yeah, I know I'm setting them up for a good financial future, but don't get too much into it. Still have time for your loved ones, I would say. That is the real secret for longevity. I'm not saying I'm the best at that. I'm still working towards it, but I think that's the real secret for me.
All right. Thank you very much, Adeel. So I don't have to say you can put your details on my platform because you've already got it on your platform. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, if you want to, I'll get my VA to give you my the links to the 3 platforms that I got. So if anyone's got any questions for Adeel, they want to chew the fat with him and find out some more information about his property strategies. And thank you so much today, Adeel, for the gold nuggets that you gave us. So thank you for the explanations.
My pleasure is all mine, Scotty. Thank you so very much for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed the chat. It was awesome. Thank you so much.
Told you, man. It's very informal. It doesn't matter. It's okay.
I love informal chats.
All right. You've been watching the Get Busy Livin podcast. I'm Dr. Scott from Six Sense Acupuncture and the Healthy Habit Club. And thanks very much, Adeel. You have a great day, guys. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in as well. Thanks, Scotty.
See you guys.